Yeah, that's
Yeah,
yeah.
that's it. Yeah.
All right, welcome everybody to the live streamed RESEED garden and facility tour. I'm Gordon from Permaculture Tasmania.
G'day, and I'm Nick, one of the co-directors for the RESEED Centre.
Nice.
So
We're here on the occasion of the AGM, and it's fine Tasmanian spring weather. So my shoes aren't going to like me at the end of this.
Yeah.
But I guess begin at the beginning, Nick. I'm going to switch the camera around.
Yep. Okay.
Tell us a little bit about the RESEED Centre.
So the RESEED Centre, so around 6-7 years ago, this site actually came up for sale, and several people actually came together. Essentially, at the time, the threat was that this site would be purchased, bulldozed with 12 to townhouses and lots of concrete and so on. But as we go around, just have in mind, is that the kind of ideal that you'd want to see for this site, or could you see something more impressive? So we established the RESEED Trust, so RESEED, renewable energy, sustainability, education and enterprise development. So we saw all of those possibilities within that site. So you'll see the physical structure. There's a lot of invisible structures behind it, and that's important to know. So we often get people who call us up, send us an email and say, oh, I heard about RESEED and I'd love to see all the permaculture in action. Now this site was not established originally as a permaculture site. The couple that we bought it off, they bought the site with a view to creating a health retreat, health and wellness retreat. Prior to that, it was an education department resource centre. Prior to that, it was actually the Penguin Infant School, and the high school was across the road where the markets are now. And before that, agricultural land, and there's obviously a history of thousands of years before that. We don't know a lot of that history well before that, but it would be important, I think, for us to incorporate that into the long journey of the RESEED Centre. So with that, let's go for a little bit of a walk around. We'll show you some of the features, but again, sort of think to yourself, what do you see as a possibility for this site? Are there any little examples of permaculture that kind of stand out as that? It's a place in evolution, and similarly to Permaculture Tasmania, it is driven by the inputs of investment and of time and resources of people involved. So we'll head for a tour. We'll head around to the west. It's kind of a 2-acre property, large buildings, old school buildings on a east-west axis. So we'll note the roof as we go past there and the 10 kilowatts of solar panels that we've installed there, and then we'll look at some of the other production on site. Shall we go?
I like it.
Yeah.
I like, Nick, that you said that a lot of the structures are invisible,
Yeah.
because if you think about the permaculture principles of land care, people care, return of surplus,
Yeah.
that's everywhere. That's the whole thing. So it is arguably a 100% permaculture site in the sense that it actually adheres to all three of those principles.
So I'll point out here, we do live in an incredible microclimate here. So notice as you look towards the north side of the building, citrus. That's actually a mandarin, it's not a kumquat, so we can raid the mandarin tree because there's some bit higher than child wrecks that are still there. Next to that is an avocado. But it's got a little bit tall, and one of the interesting things is
That's the avocado.
It started much nearer the ground, and we had a couple of people who kind of moved in eventually and said, oh, we'll help you prune it. They're from a northern climate, and so they pruned it up, whereas for us, ideally we'd prune it down. So we're kind of learning some of those things as we go. Off to the east, we have a little bit more citrus, but olives embedded there, so a good warm, again a warmish sort of microclimate for that sort of thing. All of this here was car park. So all of this in front of us, all of the vegetation, pomegranate, persimmons, the grape over the arch, all of those things were planted close to getting towards 20 years ago.
Wow.
To give you a sense of the age. All right, let's continue. So you see just on the roof here, so solar, that's half, so that's a 5 kilowatt array there. This array, all of those panels have what they refer to as micro inverters. So they basically change the current, that feeds in, and you can actually jump online and look at how they're producing in real time. It was purchased through self-managed superannuation. So if we think about the invisible structures, the economic structures, individually you might not be able to afford 5 or 10 kilowatts, well you can now because of the prices come down considerably, but at the time 10 kilowatts was more expensive, and so that was purchased through self-managed superannuation. So that's effectively a superannuation style investment there. But as I say, educationally, you can get online, you can look at how these are performing and how they've performed for the last 5 years, and you can see month by month, week by week, what's actually happening with those. And you can see, because they all have their own microinverter, you can see what's happening with every single panel. And so we'll note the ones to the east, that the avocado tree is just starting to shade out a couple of the panels, so it tells us it's time for a little prune. So that's part of the education that we offer.
Do you get much?
How much of your power does it supply? All of it?
No. So in terms of the building, we have 2 residential rooms at this end. We have a residential side on the east end, which is fully self-contained, and then a couple of commercial rooms as well as community rooms. So in terms of production, 10 kilowatts. At the moment, because it's a very old building, it's probably less than half. Okay, so we do have to be quite realistic. We have old heaters inside the room, big brown ones. Those who've gone to school in Tasmania will remember them very well. They put out a power of heat, but just 4 of those heaters, so in other words 2 rooms worth of those heaters, will consume pretty much the entire power output of these things. So it's a measure of efficiency. So of course heating is much more efficient, so we can heat most of the spaces with the same power now, so that's important.
I'm admiring the jasmine. Do you get much frost in the car park? Is it a proper microclimate with the... Yeah.
It's frost-free.
That's so good.
Yeah, frost-free environment. So it broadens the scope of what we can grow. So, here's something for your imagination. There is a pool behind this lattice. Oh, yeah.
There is too.
It is currently a habitat pond for about 3 species of
It's a pool.
frogs. But think about, so we're planning this summer to get the roof back on. We have some second-hand plastic to do that. So it really it opens up possibilities for what we do. So Robin was talking about bananas before. Maybe there's other possibilities for in there as well. It's a working site, and one of the things we've learned is that when you actually design a property, a site and so on, you actually need a good amount of space for managing all the things you produce. So managing all of the things that you prune, managing composting systems and so on. What I've come to realise is a lot of times when we go to design, we actually forget to design in. You need these spaces where you can bring in large quantities of materials on a transient basis. So they appear, they grow large in terms of pruning and things like that. Then you shrink, you move them on and so on. But that's a really important part of any site design, is thinking about if we've got large vehicles to bring large quantities of materials, it has to go somewhere. And I think we finally said, look, this is actually a good proximity because it's, I can knock here, take easily to the front, take easily to the back. So yeah. part of our inheritance here has been a lot of weeds. And that's a really interesting question for us in terms of design, because the traditional approach for it is to gather them up, put them into a rubbish bin or into a large pile and burn it, but neither of those have particularly good outcomes for the climate. And so that's a question that we're still working on. You know, what are the pathways? We now have FOGO here, so the food organics bins, and some of the most challenging weeds will probably go in there because they have systems for managing that. But ideally, we'd like to move to a point where we actually manage all of that on site, because every bit of material that you're taking off site, that's ultimately material that you need to bring back in terms of nutrients and the like. So that's a challenge to get.
What's the most surprising thing you've dug out of the ground or whatever? If it's been used for schools and government education, I'm learning that you've...
The most surprising? Well, I don't think there are surprises.
Okay, all right.
Toys.
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Small toys. No, it's been, because it's volunteer run, probably lots of things we've discovered is tools, secateurs,
Oh, yes,
gloves,
of course.
those sorts of things. So people regularly donate them to the ground. Just thinking about it in terms of, again, the microclimate. So we're looking from the north to the south. Behind us, a big hill, and that is very much a sun trap. It's also a water catchment, so we actually get quite a lot of water from that catchment coming down and supporting the trees. We've got a corridor of plum and peach and stone fruit up here. Big rambly kiwi, that's quite impressive.
Oh, look
so
at
if
that.
you want biomass, go for that. Avocado up behind there, so you can see it's just about to start flowering, and then along a bank of citrus along here to capturing again a bit of the microclimate. It's abundant in fruit, and I guess the thing to really point out again, design-wise, if you can spread your production through the year. So we've got citrus coming on, we've got kiwi just coming towards the end. With the avocado, they produce all the time, so you sort of generally pick when needed. We've got two, and yes, you do need ideally two for cross-pollination. So that's the important thing is, so the site's been designed and planted really well from the aspect of actually spreading production throughout as much of the year as possible. As far as placement and things like that, that's presented a bit of a challenge for us, because we have a lot of grass, a lot of banks, a lot of other things that actually aren't at the moment particularly easy or time efficient to manage. Sticks on their way to the mulching pile. So we've got quite a few places that people will rent and use for various purposes through the site. So this is actually one of the back rooms that's been used for quite some time as a playgroup room. And it's a really nice outlook, surrounds to the garden and grounds. So an aspiring permaculture property would not be complete without quintessential chickens. So nice example of the mobile fencing. Some of them do get out.
Yeah.
And that is a really important thing when you're thinking about designing, is they're really useful, really support clearing weeds, managing pests and so on. But if they do get out on a site particularly like this that's got a number of slopes, they can move an incredible quantity of soil down slopes, and we've got a few further up where over a couple of years they've moved probably about 2 tonnes worth of soil. So they're efficient. So that's really one that we still need to work on. So they've done a great job at fertilising the trees, and so really useful in the design, but just need to be managed. Yeah.
Do you find that some breeds dig more than others? We got Isa Browns this year, and they are insane. They'll dig anything.
Absolutely,
They turned a field in the Glastonbury
to,
Festival.
a chicken is not a chicken. There are so many different breeds that will have different characteristics as well. Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, so let's have a look up the slope. Zooming in on a nice quince.
Yep, it's spring.
Yeah. Dogs chasing chickens. That's right. That's an interesting integration.
Yeah.
So the couple that bought this site from the education department, Fred and Noreen Steve, they were, I believe, in their late 70s or early 80s when they bought the site.
Wow.
So they had big visions, even as they were in their older years. One of the unique features of this site, and quite interesting, is that you can take a wheelbarrow to pretty much every corner. So we've got ramps that are wide ramps, and then narrow paths that sort of connect each ramp. So it's not entirely obvious, but from here you can get up here, across again, and across towards the back corner. So that's a really interesting design feature, and what I understand is when they had the property focus on maximal production, they actually use these ramps for growing food, so they have garden beds either side, and I believe the production was enough for about 6 families.
Wow.
Off this site. So if you could imagine potatoes, long rows of tomatoes and so on, covering those ramps, a very large amount of production. So a good idea in the scheme of things.
Yeah.
To maximise the space, minimise the time invested in managing grass.
Yeah, exactly.
And maximising yield. But obviously you need to match that design and that kind of activity with the available people on site.
And there'd be some little microclimates here too, in different parts of the hills and different sites.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. So some aspects around the backs of buildings and so on much cooler, much damp, whereas others very suited to warmer, drier conditions. So so that's one of the really nice features of the site, is it actually has lots of nice microclimates to demonstrate.
Nick, is your boundary this fence line then?
Just the fence line here. We have dreamings, imaginings of going further up the hill, and and we'd plant nuts, and we would shake the trees, and they'd roll down.
I love it.
That's exactly how it would work.
And you just lie there in the hammock, would you, Nick?
Yeah, there's the hammock just up there. We'd be laying there. We'd be having some of the bananas from out the front.
Splendid.
Yeah.
The land that's beyond that boundary, who owns that, or where does that belong to?
Yeah, so that's attached to a house at the back there.
Yeah.
An older couple, and what we understand is that there is a little bit of slip in that area, so not suited for large development. But good opportunities, good potential.
Yeah, that's what trees are for.
So yeah. So that's an interesting thing. As I say, it's not been designed along permaculture lines from the outset, so it will probably look different. But you can probably get a sense of just the small thought we've had so far, you know, 12 townhouses, productive urban orchard, you know,
Mm-hmm.
for us the productive urban orchard idea, developing community. The key thing about here too is we're not managing all of these trees to maximise production, we're maximising learning. So we have, each year we've had for the last 3 years, pruning workshops, grafting workshops and orchard care, so that people come to learn. And now the opportunity we have is people have been doing the pruning in the last few months, and now that they're just starting to grow, it's a chance to invite people back to say, come and have a look, go and look at the branch that you pruned, see if it's doing the thing that you thought it would do. So as I say, we're not out for maximal production, we're out for the sustainability education, the learning that goes alongside that. We've grafted a few apple trees at the back, and it's really exciting to see they've taken, and then we'll see this season how they produce, how they perform as well. So it's, learning is deeply a part of what we do. So we have a few things to challenge. I mentioned the weed challenge. We have kikuyu beneath our feet, which is really tough grass that was introduced to Australia as a cattle feed, and then it's gone bigger than that. So back home in Haybridge, the kikuyu is taking over the blackberry.
Really?
Out competing blackberry.
Wow.
So that gives you a bit of a sense of that. So that's going to be one that we're going to work on. We have had some pigs in here before, and they've been quite useful for that. Guinea pigs will keep it down, they won't eliminate it. So yeah, so some interesting challenges there. We've got a lot of prunings from some of the trees that have got a little bit of disease, so we're not keen to mulch and sort of spread that around the whole site. But simply having it there in the form of a bonfire perhaps isn't the maximal use we could make of that. So thinking, can we take some of the smaller branches for pyrolysis, so creating biochar that then goes back on the site. As an example, can we have sort of a wood-fired boiler for heating water or things like that. So yeah, that's a good store of energy. We need to use it. So any questions?
What's growing here specifically in citrus and in this area?
Okay, so we have 5 or 6 different citrus. So 2 or 3 varieties of lemons. We have a lemonade, which is edible.
Really?
Kind of like a sweet. It's quite sweet. We might pick one to take in and try it. We have mandarin, some around the back, but particularly around the front. Then we have this orchard area is mostly our plum fruit, so apples and pears, and they'll come on over about a 3 to 4 month period. Several more here. We have persimmon, 2 varieties of persimmon, so they come on late, later than many of the apples. And then we have our kiwi, which is just the end of production, the avocado, a couple of almonds as well. So that's kind of the scope at the moment. And sorry, olives out the front, feijoas. So they're all coming back, you know, flooding back. You know, they're front of mind when they're right to harvest.
So if you count the kiwi as a tree,
kiwi vine,
how many trees, how many productive like fruit / whatever trees do you reckon it is on the property?
Yeah, plums, peaches, so stone fruit, yes. I'd say around 40 to 50.
That's really good. That's awesome.
Yeah. So we have a couple of grapevines, productive grapevines along here and out the front as well. So yeah, we have lost a few since we bought it. So some getting a bit older, some not being sure how to care for, and that's I think whenever you inherit an orchard or fruit trees or whatever, learning the best ways to care for them. But we're also in the process of planning to introduce more, because it's important that we don't just say, oh, we're producing masses of fruit, that we actually have a succession plan. So during COVID, we redistributed around 300 kilos of fruit, primarily from just this area. So, our pears and apples, and informally we managed the network. So we would take them home. A few people in our neighbourhoods would come by, pick those up, and then redistribute to some of the families needing support. So it's incredible yield, but it's important to kind of have succession planning in mind, because eventually some of these trees will die or become too diseased, and that's an important part. So we're kind of at the stage where we can think, okay, well, looking with a permaculture lens, how might we redesign some aspects of it?
And is it all the one sort of soil type you
It is the one soil type, and I don't want to boast. So it's a rich red crassus and volcanic soils, which obviously hold water really nicely, hold a lot of nutrient as well, and create a really nice structure. Nice structure, as I mentioned, the chickens like that structure too. So it's a very good site in terms of its soil. So if you had to land on a site, this is a nice one to land on. Yeah. Yeah, good scope. Yeah.
And how many people, what is your labour force? Like, how many people actually help manage this huge space?
Yeah, so look, that is definitely a challenge for anybody. So for ourselves, for Live Well Tasmania in Wynyard, other groups, maintaining support to manage the site. So we have recently created an orchard collective. So the idea of an orchard collective, it's people who want to come together to learn the skills, to enjoy the harvest and so on. So it's kind of a mutual development of skills and input of labour for maintaining. And we have about 8 to 10 people active in that group. That would be sufficient to maintain the base level of care for all of the established trees here, with kind of intermittent inputs. We have a few more who support managing some of the grounds, but we could do with probably a few more to then expand if we want to sort of really expand further out. And so you do for a site like this, for the kind of casual, occasional input, probably a dozen people, really. If it was full time, you'd need probably two people on a full-time basis for a site like this. If it was just mostly lawn area and not much else, it's going to be one person, a school grounds person.
And if there's people that live locally that have been too shy to sort of ask how does it work, how do we help out, what's the best way for them to get in touch? Just rock up and say
that's right. So obviously we're on social media, so we regularly will post opportunities for people to come. So we have the pruning workshop days, some working bees. Those are opportunities to come and have the kind of bit of the tour side of things, or to get in touch via email or mobile, just to say, hey, we're in the neighbourhood and like to get involved. As I say, we're focused on the learning, so ideally people come here, learn some of the skills that they can then apply further out. Yeah. Any other
Very cool.
reflections?
your composting systems? Do you have?
Okay, so we could Yes, we'll sneak around through the building to the front. So in terms of composting systems, we have a couple of the, I guess regular home style drum compost. That's for your cold compost. We have a worm farm system, and then when we have a permaculture course, like an intro, we'll often do a hot compost set up there. So there's a couple of sites where we choose to build a hot compost, and again, people can come back, have a look, and see how it's going. So arranged, and again, it's to sort of show people, so when they come to the site, there's not just one composting technique. For a site like this, if it was just your home site, you might just have a couple of very large composting bays at a convenient location. But as I say, we have everything from the small worm farm, the bathtub worm farm, to a hot compost, to a cold compost, just to be able to talk people through and walk people through the different methods they might use at home.
How about the relationship? Because we've mostly talked about the trees, but I can see you've got a veggie garden there as well. So, like with everything else, do you have volunteers sort of working on that as well?
So the site is partly residential, and so Teresa and boys in the East Wing, they have a garden space, and so we're sort of making use of the site and the amazing resources. If there were more people, potentially we can get annual food production through some of these other areas that are currently grafted over.
Cool.
Yeah. So it is one of those things that when you design, you need to kind of say, well, what are the people, what are the the hours that people have got, and what's the scope. So the scope will expand or contract on account of the people engaged. And I think the important philosophy, as I say, it's about sustainability education. So it's important that people, when they come to a working bee, come to something, there's actually some skill, some knowledge or aspect that they pick up. Rather than it just being, because there are some sites that are based just on a volunteer, come and help and pull weeds. Our philosophy is, well, by all means come pull weeds. We want to make sure that you engage in activities where you feel like you've learned some extra skill or some extra knowledge in exchange for that contribution. So that's the invisible structures.
Yeah.
That we talk about. Yeah.
Should we finish off with the seed bank, or is there more of the
We'll
tour?
head inside to the seed bank, and I can show you a bit on the courtyard. So,
Awesome.
that kind of misty day where you just get very wet standing out. But, here we go. So, live artichokes, they're on.
Nice.
Which is nice. It's kind of, it's almost every time you get to a point where you think, the harvest of this is finishing, and then you turn around and something else is producing, and that's a really nice way to be for a site, is knowing that the same finishes, something else is emerging. Great. Now, working environment. If you are filming this, you'll notice a kind of nice percussion note.
Oh yeah. What are we listening to? What's the beat?
That's right. The beat is the beat of the leak.
Of course.
The beat of a leaking roof. So whenever you take on old infrastructure, know that you are committing yourself to a lifetime of retrofitting opportunities. Yeah, renovation and retrofit opportunities.
They call that putting your own stamp on it.
Yeah, that's a nice way to frame it. So we'll head through the building. It is important actually to have, again, if you want to have sites where you have people learning and skills, you do have kind of undercover spaces that you can get a bit dirty and all the rest as well. So,
Absolutely.
I'm hearing a chicken somewhere.
No, there's a bird. I don't know if it's nesting in there, but it's nice.
Ah,
Oh, there we go.
Here we go. It's feeling very at home. Yeah, okay.
All right. Shoes off live on camera.
Continue the tour.
Yeah, let me just show people. So it was originally a school, or was it originally?
Yes. Yeah, so originally a school, and so many of the rooms have actually been retrofitted. So you can see in here, so this was a classroom.
And now it's...
It still has a classroom feel, doesn't it?
Yeah,
That's
it's
right.
cool.
Yeah.
They're very classroom windows, nice ones.
Yeah,
They're very
yeah.
classroom windows.
So a kitchenette, or kitchen facilities and so on. So this is a well loved and commonly used space. Yeah. You're oriented to where we are. So head this way. Just a little passing thing. So
Coffee.
the seat bank.
This is exciting. This is exciting.
Oops. Oh, it's not much better, is it? Okay. So this is the seed bank in a nice, cool part of the building. And so just an example, it's a very nice, simple setup. We have heritage seeds, so a number of seeds that are actually purchased, particularly for the site. So if you come, you can make a small donation for some of the heritage seeds. There's then the community aspect, and this is where people have bought along seed, been packaged up, and so this is the library bit genuine where you kind of exchange. So you might take some of those, but bring some seed in and keep maintaining that one.
And presumably there are rules around it, like they should come from your garden. I can't go to Bunnings and buy lettuce seed and swap it out with like.
Well,
I mean,
in practice, you could.
Yeah, okay.
No, in practice, if you go and get some Seed Freaks seeds or Rangeview and so on, and you find, well, we've only used half the packet. This is actually a good means to exchange, and ultimately what we'd like to do is embed some actual seed swap days. So have a seedy
idea.
Sunday or something like that, where you come across, bring the seeds you've got that are in surplus, exchange with others if you've collected some of your own as well. And there's also a mystery box, and that's the seeds that people forgot to label, have mixed up in a very large container or the like, and have been put in there. You take it home, and it's a bit of a potluck exercise. So it's a really nice thing. There are books there, guides to help people understand a bit about the potential seeds they'll harvest.
So how long have you had this running for?
So this was launched just last month.
Okay, cool. All right, good.
So,
Oh.
yeah, tell us.
Oh, it's just that there's a group of people who also making the packets.
Oh,
for the
lovely.
seeds.
That's really nice.
So they're made from any material, paper or old magazines or anything like that, which is a lovely thing to do over a lunch.
Yeah,
So a
absolutely.
group of us doing that, which is really nice.
Oh, excellent. No, this is fantastic. There needs to be so many, this is a really good model for what people should be doing. Love it.
So I guess that's the thing, trying to embed a number of reasons for people to come together. Good. So I think that's probably the cook's tour, the brief tour. As I say, there's a lot more behind it. We'll have some conversation maybe this afternoon about the money, the economics, because in practice, no one involved with this site would realistically ever have the financial means to have bought the site outright. We didn't want to go into debt to buy the site as well. That was important to us. So defining the kind of structures that can go together in there. So effectively, in terms of the finances, it's a combination of some personal investment and then a couple of self-managed superannuation funds that have kind of made made it possible. It's broadened out to include more investors. So we now have around 20 people financially invested.
And is that like an equity investment? What do you invest in?
It's a unit trust.
Okay.
So essentially a bit like shares, the unit trust issues units that have a dollar value, and then people choose how many units they wish to purchase out of that, and then obviously they're able to we can sell on the units to others.
Cool.
That's at the moment, yeah.
Well, all right.
Okay. I think that's
it.
That's it. Obviously, we can chat over lunch. More questions this afternoon. So yeah.
Yeah. Thanks very much, Nick.
Yeah. Yeah. Good.